I met the girls in every city, every town that I pass through. You won't find one half as pretty, or one with a heart so true. Don't cheer her up like that, don't cheer her up like that, don't cheer her up like that. She's a real fine lady. Mama, take this badge off of me. I don't need it anymore. It's getting dark, too dark to see. Feel like I'm knocking on heaven's door. And my manager was around the corner, and he was playing records and tapes, and I couldn't see what he was putting on. He put this song on that sounded so much like a vocal of mine that I was kidding him. I said, "When did I record that?" He said, "It isn't you." I said, "I know, I would recognize the song. It's a great song. Who is it?" He said, "It's this new guy, Tom Petty." I said, "I want to meet him." So I got to meet Tom the next day, and we went on the road together. And this is the song. Well, she was an American girl, raised on Promise Hill. She couldn't help thinking there was a little more to life somewhere else. After all, it was a great big world with lots of places to run to. And if she had died, tried, she had one little crown she was gonna keep. Well, yeah, alright, take it easy, baby, make it last all night. She was an American girl. Well, it was kinda cold that night. She stood alone on her balcony, and she could hear the cars roll back out on 441 like waves crashing on the beat. And for one desperate moment there, he slipped back in her memory. Ah, so painful when something that seems so close to so unreal. Take it easy, baby, make it last all night. She was an American girl. Yeah, she was an American girl, raised on Roslyn. She couldn't help thinking there was a little more to life somewhere else. After all, it was a great big world with lots of places to run to. And if she had died, cried, she had one little crown she was gonna keep. Oh yeah, alright, take it easy, baby, make it last all night. She was an American girl. Well, yeah, alright, take it easy, baby, make it last all night. She was an American girl. We were throwing frisbees, and one of them came sailing down out of the bleachers and hit my wife Camilla in the eye.
Oh, wow.
That wasn't serious, but the promoter said, well, somebody should take a look at it. So he took us backstage where they had a doctor. And just as we were going backstage, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were getting off the bus and going to their dressing room. And Tom saw me in the hall. He said, "Roger McGuinn, you got to come up and do a couple of songs with me." Well, this is Tampa in August and I was wearing white shorts and a red Hawaiian shirt.
What year?
Oh, let's see, what year was that? Doesn't matter. Anyway, so I did a couple of songs. I looked more like I was going to a Jimmy Buffett concert. I did a couple of songs with Tom, and the next day he invited me out to the hotel on the beach where he was staying with his family. And his daughters were quite young at the time, so we were all flying kites on the beach, and he kind of casually mentioned, he said, you know, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to tour with Bob Dylan in Europe. I went, oh man, you're going to have so much fun. Because I was on the 1975 Rolling Thunder tour with Bob, and it was great. It was a great tour.
Oh my word.
And so Tom said, well, I'll ask Bob if he can come along. I said, okay. So the next day Tom called up and he said, yeah, I talked to Bob. He said, bring him along. You can be the opening act. Well, the way the tour was structured was Tom and the Heartbreakers were the house band. So they came out and backed me up on some Byrds songs, and then I'd go off and they do their set, and then they back Bob Dylan up on his whole show. And at the end, we all got together and sang Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Wow.
And the tour ended up in London, and in London, George Harrison joined us on Knockin' on Heaven's Door. It was a really great tour. Ringo was there. It was really cool. On the tour, Tom was reading a book. It was an autobiography by John Phillips, so the Mamas and Papas. Now, I'd known John and Michelle Phillips in Greenwich Village when I lived in the Village, and I lived in the same building as they did. I was on the 7th floor, they were down on the 2nd floor, and I used to hang out with them all the time, so I wanted to read the book too. And after reading the book, Tom and I were kind of comparing notes and decided it would be good material for a song. So we wrote this song, and Tom performed it with me on my Back from Rio album. LA's asleep. You roll up your window. The night air is cold. The freeway's clear. And that green Gucci bag are your prized possessions. The jewels of your mind to hold back the fear. When Monday comes round, there's a high lonesome sound, and she follows you down toward the hill. And the white blinding light makes it all seem so right, and you feel like the king of the hill. The driveway is long, your princess is lovely, your servants are lovely, for you're not on the door. How many years will you crawl through this castle, so satisfied and still wanting more? When Monday comes round, there's a high lonesome sound, and she follows you down toward the kill. And the white blinding light makes it all seem so right, and you feel like the king of the hill. Woo! 1968, I was playing with the Byrds at the Fillmore East. And I was in the dressing room, and this very attractive blonde woman came backstage and said, "My boyfriend would like you to write a Broadway musical with him." I said, "Okay." And then he came in, and you could see why he sent his girlfriend in first. He's a big burly guy named Jacques Levy, Broadway director. And the Byrds had just recorded The Sweetheart of the Rodeo country music, and his idea was to take Heinrich Ibsen's Peer Gynt and transform it into a country rock musical. So that's what we did. We wrote 26 songs for it, and it was based on Peer Gynt, where, well, I'll tell you more about that. But there's a scene where we moved it from Norway in 1871 to the Western United States. And there's a scene where the lead character is down in New Orleans, and he's a riverboat gambler, and this character named the Lover of the Bayou comes up and harasses him. Catfish, pine, and cream ribeye. I'm the lover of the bayou. Monkey gon' step with a half-wit ray. I'm the lover of the bayou. Raised and square, always alone. Never with the herd. Prettiest mare I've ever seen. You have to take my word. I'm gonna catch that horse if I can. And when I do, I'll give her my brand. Then I want to do something different. Now, Bob Dylan saying he wants to do something different. It's like, let's go to Mars. I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't know, something like a circus. I said, okay. And that was it. Went back to shooting baskets. A couple of months later, I was on the road with my band, and I had a lot of concert dates booked across the country, and I had some time off in New York City. And I used to live in the Village, so I always liked to go back there. So I went down to Greenwich Village, and I went to a club I used to go into. And in the back room was Jacques Levy, who co-wrote those 2 songs with me. And he was a Broadway director, and real dramatic guy. And Bob Dylan sat next to him. They were having a couple of brandies. And Jacques, being dramatic, he threw the table over and the brandies went flying like an old Western movie. And they said, Roger, we were just talking about you. We're putting this tour together. We want you to go on it. And I said, I don't know if I can. I got these dates booked with my band. But the next day I called up my agent and asked if I could postpone them. And he said I could. So I went on the Rolling Thunder Review. And it was all Bob's friends from the Village. It was like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Ramblin' Jack Elliott and Allen Ginsberg. Joni Mitchell was out there, and Bobby Booth. It was a great trip. About 100 people on the road. And the way it worked was we get on these buses and go up to a town. I think we started in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and call up the radio station and say, Bob Dylan and his friends are in town and we're going to be at the theater. And it would sell out like in 2 seconds. And we do a 4.5-hour show, and then we get back on the buses and go to another town and do it again. It was really cool. Well, the buses, after the show, we get on these buses in the night and they kind of roll back and forth. And it was like a pirate ship. So Jacques Levy and I decided to write a pirate song to kind of capture the feeling of the buses on the Rolling Thunder tour. The sun come upon the Spanish sea, our homeland far behind us, being hunted by the King's Navy, but sure he'd never find us. Pull away, lads, with the Cardiff Rose, and hoist the Jolly Roger. This has an interesting clapping pattern. I'll tell you where to clap. Clap, 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 clap. I've no doubt his name was Blue. Had an old dog, his name was Blue. Had an old dog, his name was Blue. Bet you $5 is a good dog too. But this guitar's got an extra string on it. Yeah, it's in the middle. And the reason for it, I used to carry a 12 string and a 6 string on airplanes, and they broke one of my 12 strings on an airplane. Imagine that. Anyway, I thought it'd be great to get the best part of the 12 string on a 6 string. So I went to the Martin Guitar Company and I sat down with Dick Boak, who's the artist representative there. And he and I had lunch and we drew this mapped it out on a paper napkin, and then they made me one of these things in the custom shop. And the idea is you get the best part of the 12 strings, this pair of strings. Sounds like a 12 string when you do that, but it's more versatile. You can bend the strings like, or do little runs like I was doing on Pretty Boy Floyd. So it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a guitar. And they made me one in the custom shop, and before they sent it to my house, a couple of other guitar players came in and played it and said, hey, I want one of these too. So they made a whole run of them called the Roger McGuinn HD7. And if you get one of these, you'll be able to play this right out of the box. I used to work for Darin. And the way I got the job, I was working with the Chad Mitchell Trio, and we were playing the Crescendo Club in LA, and opening up for Lenny Bruce. And Lenny was really hilarious when he wasn't in jail. And Darin was in the audience, and he came backstage after the Chad Mitchell set, and he said, hey, I like what you were doing up there. I'm thinking about putting a folk segment in my act, and I'd like to hire you. I said, well, I've already got a job with the Chad Mitchell Trio. He said, yeah, what are they paying you? And I told him. He said, I'll double it. I went, okay. So I worked for Bobby for about a year, backing him up on 12-string guitar and singing harmony. And sometimes he'd give me a song to sing by myself. It was really fun. But after a while, his voice got a little rough, and he decided to take a break from singing. So he opened up a publishing company in the Brill Building in New York City, 1619 Broadway. It's a sort of a factory for pop music called Tin Pan Alley. They called it that because in the summertime they used to have all the windows open before they had air conditioning, and all these people banging on tinny pianos sounded like tin pans. So my job was to listen to the radio and write songs like the ones out there. And Shannon Dean and the Beach Boys were popular at that time, so I thought I'd take a stab at surf music. Came up with a little surf song, and I took it down the hall to Bobby and showed it to him, and he liked it. So much that he picked up a phone and booked a studio downstairs in the Brill Building. See, the Brill Building was an early sort of example of vertical integration. They had publishing companies, and record companies, and recording studios, all in the same building. You could get a record deal, record the thing, and have it published all in the same day in the same building. So it's really amazing. So I'll show you a little bit of the song if you won't laugh too hard. Okay? Summer's here, it's time to have a party. We're going to the beach, we're gonna have a beach ball. And a cart full of hot dogs and a trunk full of soda. We're gonna keep it swinging until next fall. Oh, we're having a beach ball. Everybody's feeling fine. Oh, we're gonna have a beach party. Could you find a better way to spend the summertime? Oh, we're having a beach ball, everybody's feeling fine. Oh, we're gonna have a beach party. Could you find a better way to spend the summertime? So Capitol Records signed us. We had to come up with a name for the band, and we called ourselves the City Surfers, because we're all from the city and we didn't know how to surf. I have to say the City Surfers is probably one of the shortest-lived acts in show business. I think four records came out, 4 singles, and that was it. But some years later, I was in Miami at the Criteria studio recording with McGuinn, Clark, and Hillman, and the Bee Gees were in the next studio over, and they came up to me and said, "Hey, we sang background on the song you wrote." I couldn't imagine a song I'd written, the Bee Gees, would have sung background on. I said, "Yeah, it's called Beach Ball. It was number 6 in Australia." Well, back at the Grill Building, my job was to listen to the radio and write songs like the ones out there. And this came over the airwaves. Oh yeah, tell you something, I think you'll understand. The Beatles, they were using folk music chords in their rock and roll. That gave me an idea of taking an old folk song and souping it up with a Beatle beat. Take a song like, "The water is wide, I cannot cross over, and neither have I wings to fly." I put a Beatle beat to it like this. "The water is wide, I cannot cross over, and neither have always do fly. Build me a boat that can carry two, and both shall roam, my love and I." I took it down to Greenwich Village and played it in the coffee houses, and the people in the coffee houses didn't like it. But the guy who ran the coffee house loved it. He put a sign outside the front door that said, "Beatle impersonation." Gray Line buses were coming around. I thought, this is embarrassing, it's time to get out of town. So I hopped a plane and went out to LA and got a job at the Troubadour Folk Club in Hollywood, opening up for my old friend Hoyt Axton. Yeah, Hoyt let me be on his first album called The Balladeer. In fact, it was the first time I got to sing on a record, and it was Brisbane Ladies. And so I was opening up for Hoyt, and he was doing great, and I was doing folk songs with a Beatle beat. But there was one guy in the audience who liked it. He came backstage after the show and said, "Hey, I like the Beatles, and I like folk music. Let's write some songs and see what happens." So his name was Gene Clark. We sat down in the front room of the Troubadour, started writing songs, and this is one of the first songs we put together. It was later recorded by a group called the Turtles, and they got a top 10 hit with it. You showed me how to do exactly what you do, and I fell in love with you. Oh, no, it's true, I'm in love with you. And you showed me how to say exactly what you say in that very special way. Oh, it's true, you fell for me too. So Gene Clark and I were writing songs every day, and one day this chubby little fellow walked in and started singing harmony with us, and he said, "I want to be in your band." I said, "Well, we don't really have a band, David. It's writing some songs here." He said, "Oh, come on, man, if I could be in your band, I know this guy's got a recording studio we could use for free." I said, "You're in." So David Crosby took us over to meet his friend Jim Dixon, who was a producer engineer at World Pacific Records in Hollywood. And Jim kind of took us under his wing. He became our manager, and he let us mess around with the recording machines after all the sessions were over at World Pacific. And that's when we discovered that we needed a bass player and a drummer, because we wanted to sound more like the Beatles, and we were sounding more like a folk group. So we saw this guy walking in front of the Troubadour. It looked just like two of the Rolling Stones. We said, "Him, let's get him." We got Michael Clark to come over. I said, "You know how to play the drums?" He said, "Well, I'll play a little congas, man." Good enough. So we got some cardboard boxes, and we taped a tambourine on top, and we gave him some drumsticks, and he learned how to play drums on that. And then we got Chris Hillman to come over from Westwood, where he was in a bluegrass band called the Scottsville Squirrel Barkers. And we had this $35 bass. We handed it to Chris and said, "Here, figure this out." And he went, "Okay." He had it right away. He was such an excellent musician. He played mandolin and guitar and figured out the bass right away. So we had a good bass player and sort of a drummer. But we didn't have any decent instruments. We had cardboard boxes and an acoustic guitar and a $35 bass. So we went to see the Beatles movie, A Hard Day's Night, and copied down what they were playing. Yeah, Ringo Starr had Ludwig drums. We got to get some Ludwig drums. George Harrison had a Gretsch guitar. We got to get a Gretsch. And John Lennon had a little Rickenbacker, and we got to get one of those. And then George came out with a Rickenbacker. It looked like a 6-string from the front, but when he turned it sideways, you could see 6 other tuning pegs sticking out the back. I went, that's a sneaky electric 12-string. I got to get one of those. So I traded in my acoustic 12 and my 5-string banjo and some cash and got a Rickenbacker electric 12. So we had some good instruments. We were looking for a name, though. Sitting around the Thanksgiving table. Somebody said, "What about the Byrdsies?" He said, "Oh, no, that's too cute. We couldn't use that." He said, "Well, what about the Byrds?" Well, 1964, the Byrds was slang for girls in England. We didn't want to be the girls. I said, "Well, that's simple. Just change the spelling. What about B-U-R-D-S?" We went, "Ooh." Then we came up with the B-Y-R-D-S. And Jim Dixon arranged for us to audition for this big agent in Hollywood named Benny Shapiro. So we went over to Benny's house and sang a couple of songs. And we didn't know it, but he had a teenage daughter upstairs. She came running down the stairs all excited. "Daddy, Daddy, who's that?" She thought the Beatles were in her living room. And the next day, Miles Davis came over to talk to Benny because it was his agent. And Benny's telling Miles, "You know, a funny thing happened last night. These kids came over to audition and my daughter heard them and she flipped out. She thought they were great." And Miles said, "Well, kids have a way of knowing things like that." So he picked up the phone and called Columbia Records and said, "You know, that rock group you've been looking for? I think I got them for you." And they signed us on his recommendation. But Columbia was a very conservative label. They had classical music, Broadway show tunes, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, and Doris Day. They didn't have any rock and roll. They were a little bit afraid of it, but they gave us a deal for one single. If we got a hit with the single, we could go back in the studio and finish off the album. So we needed a really strong song, and nobody thought any of our songs were that strong. But Jim Dixon had overheard a couple of record producers in Hollywood talking about Bob Dylan and saying, "You know, it's a shame Bob can't use that great new song he just wrote because somebody was singing out of tune on it." It wasn't Bob. So we got a copy of it sent out from New York, from Whitmark and Sons, the publishing company, to LA. We all sat around on the floor of the World Pacific studio listening to this pretty long song. It was about 4 minutes and 19 seconds in 2/4 time. You got 4 minutes and 19 seconds? Okay? So this will show you how long 4 minutes and 19 seconds can be. Hey, Mr. Family Man, yeah. Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. The jingle jangle might have come following you. I wouldn't play anything over 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This is AM radio back then. It's all mono singles, 2 minutes, 30 seconds at maximum. And they weren't playing a lot of folk music anymore. They were playing the Beatles and the Stones, and it was all in a 4/4 beat land. So I had an idea of how to fix that song up for radio. I've been playing around on the guitar with a little box. I thought, what if I put something like that in the front and the back and then shorten it down to one verse and put a chorus on either side and kick the whole thing up with a Beatle beat? It might come out okay for radio. Came out like... Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song plane. Gene Clark and I wanted to write a song about the tour. And he said, how high do you think this plane is flying? I said, probably about 39,000 feet, 7 miles high. I said, 7 miles high, huh? Because the Beatles had a song out called 8 Days a Week, and he thought the number 8 was a cooler number. I said, well, we can change it to 8 miles high. Who's going to care? It's a poetic license, right? Well, I was wrong about that because the radio stations did the math. They said, wait a minute. Commercial airliners don't fly 8 miles high. They must be talking about some other kind of high, man. Over the years, it's evolved. It's got a little bit of John Coltrane, some Ravi Shankar, and some Andre Segovia thrown in just for fun. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. Here we go. To everything, turn, turn, turn. Here is a season, turn, turn.